Establishment of British Empire in India. So let's read the textbook of 7th class 15th chapter. Aurangzeb was the last of the powerful Mughal rulers. He established control over a very large part of the territory that is now known as India. After his death in 1707 Common Era, many Mughal governors who were called Subedars and big zamindars began asserting their authority and establishing regional kingdoms. Consequently, Delhi could no longer function as an effective center. By the second half of the 18th century, however, a new power was emerging on the political horizon, the British. Did you know that the British originally came to India as a small trading company? How then did they become the masters of a vast empire? Let's say this. East India Company comes to East. In 1600 Common Era, the East India Company acquired a charter from the ruler of England, Queen Elizabeth I, granting it the sole right to trade with the East. This meant that no other trading group in England could compete with the East India Company. With this charter, the company could venture across the oceans, looking for new lands from which it could buy goods at a cheap price and carry them back to Europe to sell at a higher prices. And here we have mercantilism. So mercantile is a business enterprise that makes profit primarily through trade. Trading companies in those days made profit primarily by excluding competition so that they could buy cheap and sell at higher rates. The Royal Charter, however, could not prevent other European powers from entertaining the eastern markets. By the time the first English ship sailed down the west coast of Africa, round the Cape of Good Hope, and crossed the Indian Ocean, the Portuguese had already established their presence in the western coast of India and had their base in Goa. It was Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese explorer, who had discovered the sea route to India in 1498. By the early 17th century, the Dutch, which is now called Holland, too were exploring the possibilities of trade in the Indian Ocean. Soon the French traders arrived on the scene. So now let's see what happened. The problem was that all the companies were interested in buying the same goods. The fine qualities of cotton and silk produced in India had a big market in Europe. Spices like pepper, cloves, cardamom, and cinnamon too were in great demand. Competition among the European companies inevitably pushed up the prices at which the goods were purchased. Trade was carried out with arms and trading posts were protected through fortification. This effort to fortify settlements and carry on profitable trade led to intense conflict with the local rulers. Armed traders. European traders formed their own companies to trade in India. The English traders formed the English East India Company, while traders from France formed the French East India Company. Both companies fought against each other for many years to capture the trade in India. Each made efforts to drive the other away. They brought armies from England and France to help them in their fight. The kings of England and France also backed their respective companies and helped them in many ways. Now understand how big was India in those days, the Indian market, and how these companies have come. So let's look into further. The companies acquired land in India and built their own forts to wage battles against each other. The wealth that was accumulated in this way was one of the most important factors that enabled England to develop industries and establish their dominance in the world. This was the time when England, as well as some other European countries like Spain, Portugal, France, Holland, and Germany, were acquiring colonies in North and South America, Africa, and Asia. The colonies contributed to the power and wealth of these European countries. The Mughal emperors, as well as many Rajas and Nawabs, began to realize how dangerous it was to let such traders maintain armies, build forts, fight battles, and use military force to establish their economic power in their kingdoms. As long as the Mughal Empire was strong, it had not been possible for the European companies to establish their own military power in India. In fact, emperors like Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb had fought and defeated the European companies on a number of occasions. However, some years after the death of Aurangzeb, the different provinces of the empire became almost independent and were ruled by their respective governors. Thus, Bengal, Awadh, which is now Lucknow, and Hyderabad became independent kingdoms which only nominally acknowledged the Mughal emperor as their supreme. Once the Mughal Empire broke up into these small kingdoms, the companies found their chance to assert their power. Though the Rajas and Nawabs wanted more trade, they also tried to check the growing military strength of the companies. For example, in 1764 Common Era, Nawab Anwaruddin Khan of Arcot in northern Tamil Nadu sent his army to fight against the French company. However, to everyone's astonishment, the small French army managed to defeat the large army of the Nawab. The European traders became bolder after this victory and felt that they could do whatever they wanted in India because of the strength of their armies. How were the European armies different from the armies of Indian rulers in the 1700s? The soldiers of European armies were better trained and received higher and more regular salaries. They also had better cannons and guns. The European armies held parades and drills every day. With such regular exercise, Indian soldiers enrolled in these armies also became quite skilled in battle. Growing European interference in the kingdoms of India. The companies used their military advantage to increase their profits from trade. On many occasions, when they saw two Indian rulers fighting among themselves, they would take sides and get involved in the fight. They would lend their army to one side to help them defeat their rivals. But in return, the companies would demand and extract many trade concessions from the rulers. The rulers also gifted the companies large amounts of money in return for their military help. This money helped the companies increase their trade even more. Look at what's happening next. For example, Duplex, a governor of a French East India Company, helped Muzaffar Jung to become the Nizam of Deccan. In return, Muzaffar Jung gave the French some territories near Pondicherry and the town of Machilipatnam. He also gave rupees 50,000 to the company, rupees 50,000 to the French troops, and rupees 20 lakh and a jagir worth of 1 lakh per year to Duplex. The companies also began to acquire small parts of kingdoms as gifts from the local rulers. They would collect land tax from the villages and towns in these areas and use the money for their trading activities. They also used this money for maintaining and improving their army. Slowly, the English company began emerging victorious over the French company in the struggle for dominance in India. Now, misuse of the company's power. The Indian rulers soon found that the burden of giving gifts to the English East India Company and bearing the expenses of its army was becoming very heavy. They were also troubled by many other activities of the company. Some Indian rulers exempted the company from paying taxes on many of the goods it purchased from their kingdoms. However, people began taking advantage of these concessions. For example, employees of the company would do their own private trading, but they would show their own goods as belonging to the company to escape paying taxes. In this way, while the company got richer, its employees and officers also made a lot of money in India and returned home wealthy. Many Indian traders and SCERTs helped the company in its trade. They too showed their goods as belonging to the company to escape paying taxes. Thus, there was much looting and swindling taking place in the kingdoms under the company. So proud was the company of its military strength that it began working with great impudence. It forced craftsmen to sell their goods at lower prices. In the areas it had acquired, the company tried to squeeze revenue from the peasants beyond reasonable limits. When the rulers protested against such practices, the English fought against them. They even went to the extent of dethroning the kings and anointing successors who would be only too willing to remove any obstacles in the way of their trade. The English imposed their rule. The English gradually began to feel that they could make fuller and freer use of India for trade if they themselves ruled the country. So they started removing the Nawabs and Rajas and started ruling themselves. In 1757 Common Era, the English defeated Siraj-ud-Dawla, the Nawab of Bengal, at a place called Plassey and established their rule over Bengal. The Battle of Plassey is an important event in the Indian history. After that, the English started conquering many other kingdoms of India, big and also small. Now we'll see what else happened after this. Are you ready? Right. The English East India Company also forced the Nizam of Hyderabad to hand over the coastal Andhra Pradesh districts Krishna, East Godavari, West Godavari, Srikakulam, Vijayanagaram, Prakasham, Vishakhapatnam and Guntur between the years 1765 to 1768. These were known as the Northern Sarkars of the Madras province of the company. In return, the English agreed to maintain an army contingent for the use of the Nizam. In fact, this army was used more to control the Nizam rather than to help him. Many Rajas and Nawabs understood the British plot and fought hard against them. They included Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan of Mysore, the Maratha Sardar Mahadaji Shinde, Nana Parnawaz, and others, but their kingdoms were small. One by one, they lost them to the English. Among those who played an important role in the British success on the battlefield were General Robert Clive, Warren Hastings, and Lord Wellesley. Slowly, large parts of India came under the direct rule of the English. In many places, the Rajas and Nawabs continued to rule, but they were under the sovereignty of the English. An English official, known as the resident, would be assigned to stay in the court of these kings or Nawabs so that the British government could keep an eye on how they ran their kingdoms. Discontent with English rule. The English had to fight with many kings and Nawabs to establish their rule. You will learn more about their policies and administration in later years. They constantly faced resistance from the people of India. The royal families resisted them because the English would anoint or remove rulers as and when it suited their purposes. Farmers and landowners resisted them because the English imposed very high taxes on them and collected the taxes very strictly. So they lived in constant fear of failing to pay the taxes and losing their lands as a result. Tribal people also offered resistance because of the new rules and laws that the English began implementing in their areas. As a result, many tribal people lost their rights over jungles and land. You will read more about this in the later years. Many Hindus and Muslims feared that the English would destroy their faiths and convert them to Christianity. The English faced their toughest battle in 1857 when, for a few months, their rule was uprooted over almost the entire northern Indian region. This revolt was started by Indian Sipahis or soldiers who were soon joined by royal families, landowners, farmers, tribal people, and craftsmen. The royal families who joined the revolt include Nana Sahib, the adopted son of the Peshwa, Tantia Top, his general, the Begum of Awadh and Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi, Hindus and Muslims fought together against their common enemy. The Revolt of 1857. Place: the military cantonment at Meerut, where the British Army had camped. Date: Sunday, May 10th, 1857. The sun was about to set when the Indian soldiers began firing their guns on their English officers. These were the same soldiers who had helped the English to conquer the kingdoms of India. They were now fed up with the behavior of the English. They were not getting their salaries on time, and they were not treated with respect in the British Army. On top of this, the Sipahis suspected that the cartridges for their new guns, rifles, were coated with cow and pig fat to keep them dry. They felt that their religious faith was being violated. Based on this suspicion, a similar uprising had occurred at Barakpur near Kolkata in March 1857. The sense of discontent at Meerut was widespread, and on this day, the soldiers opened fire on their English officers. The rebellious officers marched towards Delhi that very night. Let's see how to load a gun. The soldier was supposed to tear open the paper case with his teeth, just like this, and he would pour the gunpowder into the rifle. He would then ram the bullet wrapped in the paper into the rifle, just like that, and then he needs to aim and fire.
Naie field rifle! Dunyaki! Sabse achi rifle hai! Chalo! Tum try karo! Tum! Oh tum!
But nobody moves, because these soldiers have already seen that the cartridges were greased with the meat or the fat of a cow and pig.
Sabada! Sir, what's the matter?
सिपाही नए कारतूस का इस्तेमाल नहीं करना चाहते साहब।
Damn it, Bach Khan! Now this is the army. A soldier uses whatever arms and ammunition he is asked to use. First company, first platoon, step forward! Enough! If you do not move, I will blow you apart with cannon! Move the artillery forward! You will obey orders! I will count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
They killed the rebels in a most inhuman ways and hanged their bodies from trees in the villages so that the village folk would understand the consequences of revolt. The speed with which the revolt spread frightened the English, so they behaved with greater cruelty whenever they suppressed a rebel group. They tied some rebels to the mouths of cannons and blew them to bits. Many rebels went into hiding, moving from place to place to avoid being caught by the English. Many of them even went to places like Nepal to hide. The English deported Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar to a faraway location in Rangoon, and it was there that the last Mughal emperor died. The revolt of 1857 was the biggest revolt to challenge the might of the English. After suppressing it, their hold over India became stronger and they ruled the country for the next 90 years. It took the English more than a year to suppress the revolt of 1857. During this period, they changed many of their policies and adopted new ones. In 1858, Queen Victoria of England made an important declaration. She said Indian kings should rule their own kingdoms without anxiety because the English would not try to dethrone them. In this way, Queen Victoria established a close collaboration with the royal families of India. Similarly, the zamindars too were given many concessions and were assured that their property would be protected. The Pandits and Maulvis were assured that the British government would not interfere in matters relating to Indian religions and would let the old traditions continue. There was also a promise that Indians would be included in the government. The truth is that the English had seen their Indian empire being snatched away in 1857. Now, they directed their efforts towards giving all kinds of concessions to the allied powerful Indians to conciliate them and ensure that they continued to support the English. And after 90 years, we got our independence.